Patrick, I know we're sending a mission out to another unusual object. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, the anticipation is over after years of hearing about this mission. This is NASA's mission to send a spacecraft to study the metallic world called 16 Psyche. Just a few days ago, the spacecraft was all boxed up and carried on a C-17 to Kennedy Space Center, and it will be removed and prepared for launch. Here is an image of the spacecraft actually at JPL in Southern California, being wheeled down the corridor, the completed spacecraft, into a large vacuum chamber where they simulate the environment of space and also the launch vibrations and heating and stresses on the spacecraft. It passed with flying colors. The spacecraft has very large solar panels. Here's one of them, which is 37 foot long. The reason it needs these solar panels is that it powers an ion drive. It also needs to operate where Psyche is. It's located between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter in the middle of the asteroid belt, where it needs as much sunlight as it can to power the spacecraft. What do we know about Psyche? We have these radar images that show the shape of the asteroid, which is about 140 miles across. We also have these images taken by the Very Large Telescope, giving you a hint of some of the coloration or the shading on this asteroid, and also from the shape. People have modeled from these observations the shape and some of the rough topography of the asteroid. And this is an interesting thing. This is a 3D print from Arizona State University of Psyche. The model matches the artist's rendition. So those craters are kind of artist impressions of where we think the craters are. The shape is very much what it would look like. This 3D print took about 86 hours and 43 minutes to print. So they're going to paint it later to approximate the light as far as the coloration of the asteroid, and that's based on spectral emissions from the asteroid. Now, what makes this a special asteroid? Well, 1% of the asteroids in the asteroid belt are actually metal asteroids. And how do they form? There's the 5-stage process where at the beginning of the solar system, material gathers through gravitation, and you get an early planetesimal, and that planetesimal could be fairly large, such that metals such as nickel and iron will sink to the center of the planetoid in a process called differentiation. And then also there's radioactive minerals and materials that will cause volcanism. It causes heating as well. And then eventually the planetoid cools down and it has a solid metal center, iron and nickel and other very heavy metals. And then just above it is a large covering of a mixture of metal and rock. And then you have the outer crust, which is the dark part of it. Somewhere during the history of this particular asteroid, there were impacts. There were lots of asteroids that impacted and worn down the crust and part of the rocky metal mixture above it, leaving the exposed core of what was a planetoid in the asteroid belt. Now, we have clues of what that might look like from meteorites that we have. On the left, here is our very own iron meteorite here at Griffith Observatory. It's 269 pounds. And that would be representative of the core of where it came from a core of an asteroid. On the right, there is what we call stony type iron meteorites, which is a mixture of iron and rock, which represents the material above it. Now, we won't know exactly what this asteroid looks like up close until Psyche spacecraft arrives at Psyche in 2026. So it will go into orbit around this asteroid for 21 months. It will study the asteroid starting from an orbit of 457 miles to a mere 53 miles at the end of its mission. So very exciting, and we're looking forward to that. Now, going from metal to water and water ice, the Europa Clipper, this is a mission to the icy moon of Jupiter. This icy moon has an icy crust. Possibly beneath that is an ocean of liquid water. So very good candidate for possible studies of life, if there's any life there. Work has begun on that. Some of the components just going clockwise from the left. You see part of the propulsion system, Next is the ultraviolet spectrometer. And then on the right there is the high gain antennae. Most of the flight hardware is scheduled to be completed by the end of this year, among some of the other 9 instruments that will be arriving at the assembly point at JPL later on in the year. So that's very exciting. The timeline on this mission is launch is in 2024. Arrival at Jupiter is in the year 2030. The spacecraft will spend a year going around Jupiter, altering its orbit, so it will intercept Europa. There will be 45 flybys in a span of 3 years. So it will give us a lot of information about this moon that we have not had before. And incidentally, in September of this year, there will be a very close flyby of Juno around Europa. That will give us some of our first pictures just ahead of this Europa Clipper mission.
Well, fantastic. That's going to be a very exciting mission once it finally launches.